Get more confidence. Get that promotion. Get moving up the corporate ladder. Get a better gig with an MBA from Mays Business School at Texas A&M University. Whether you're starting out or stepping up, now you can take your career to a whole new level with a full-time MBA in College Station and convenient weekend options at Houston City Center. Texas A&M has a program to suit your schedule. Visit mba.tamu.edu. And Giga Maggie.
Howdy, welcome to Mays MasterCast. I'm Shannon Deere, the Interim Associate Dean for Undergraduate Programs, here with your vibrant host, Ben Wiggins.
Thanks, Shannon. Your adjectives have been off the chart lately.
I'm working on it.
I'm feeling a little vibrant today.
You are,
How are
and
you
you're
doing?
wearing that pink shirt. I like it.
It is a good pink shirt. It's a good shade of pink. I feel like this is like the right shade of pink for me today.
Especially for April. I think it's nice. Complements your skin tone well. You got it going on.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Same to you. You got it going on as well.
All right. Today on the show, we have Liz Beechinor. Liz is the president and
Not Beechinor.
Not Beechinor. You will find out on the show it is not Beechinor. Don't make it fancy now. Liz is the president and CEO of Coefficient Marketing, an agency that helps small teams identify the right marketing variables to multiply for big results. She started Coefficient Marketing after 10 years of experience as VP of Marketing at JB Knowledge in Austin, Texas, and a year as VP Programs and Events for another firm in Austin. She is well-versed in building content for all marketing channels, optimizing for discovery and tracking ROI, and she thrives on improving collaboration, data systems, and creativity. We love Liz. She works remotely and across the world. So if you have marketing needs, definitely reach out to Coefficient Marketing. She was really just so bright in the show and shared so many insights and can definitely help your company as well. Liz is a military wife, passionate about hiring other military wives. She graduated from Texas A&M with a degree in finance, and she was in our business honors program. She is passionate about tech, travel, entrepreneurship, and very importantly, s'mores. We hope you enjoy the episode with Liz.
I sure did. We welcome Liz Beechinor to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ben. Happy to be here.
Happy to be here. I'm happy that I correctly understood how to pronounce your name. It is not Beechinor.
No, it is
Nothing
not.
fancy like that.
As fancy as that sounds.
What is your favorite superpower?
So I'm actually going to steal this from an Aggie who I interviewed for an internship years ago. And I wish I remembered their name. If you're listening to this, feel free to call me out on Twitter. But they said that they wish they could operate without needing to sleep. And I've always remembered that because I'm like, oh man, if I had all of that extra time, if other people were still sleeping, I would use all of it for just like personal hobbies. Just work on stuff. And if everyone else had the same power, then I just feel like I would spend it with family and friends, just doing a lot more social stuff. So I think that would be a pretty sweet superpower.
I love that answer. And I don't think we've ever had anything like that before. We've had like time travel and manipulating time and so forth, but this would be a great way to hack it. There is a culture in, I think, Iceland where they sleep a lot less. They sleep like, I don't know, 3-4 hours a night. I mean, it's not nothing,
really?
but they do sleep a lot less. And unfortunately, it seems to have adverse effects on their life expectancies too.
I would imagine. Yeah, man, I'd be a monster. I don't know how,
I
don't know how they do that.
Yeah. So I envy your superpower is what I'm trying to say. Where did you grow up?
So this is either military brat's favorite or least favorite question. I grew up all over the place. We moved every 2 years. So I think everyone's a little bit different. You know, I know a lot of military brats who home was always where their family was located, but my mom is from New York. My dad's from Texas. So my extended family was spread out as well. So really, I just came to know it as where my immediate family is located. And they're actually all in Texas now. And after going to A&M and working for companies based in Texas, I do call Texas home, but it took a long time to get there. I didn't have an answer to that until I was, I don't know, maybe 26, 27.
How many in your family?
I have 3 older brothers. Luckily, they all married up. So I have 3 sister-in-laws, 6 nephews, and a niece.
Nice. So you were military family, and I
Mm-hmm.
guess you've talked a little bit about how that impacted you, but what can you share about what your parents were doing, and how that impacted you?
Yeah, so my dad served for 40 years in the Air Force, which is a really long time. He started as an A-10 pilot, then flew F-16s. He flew in Operation Desert Storm. And then, as you say, in the military, and as you gain more responsibility and move up, you work in all different types of jobs. So he's got an insane resume. But ultimately, he was the chief of staff of the Air Force, which is the head of the Air Force, which was obviously a very wild experience for him and for my family.
Yeah.
And now he's actually the dean of the Bush School at A&M. And so I learned a lot from watching him, go through all of these roles. But I think I would say I learned the most, and I would give the most kudos to my mom. And I don't mind saying that because I know my dad would agree. But my mom, she moved 23 times since marrying my dad. And so she was this incredible mom, raised 4 kids, was this incredible Air Force spouse, won Officer Spouse of the Year, et cetera. But somehow she was also a career woman. I mean, she set goals for herself, had all this individual development, challenged herself. She had several different careers, all within the health and wellness and nutrition industry. And it was really cool to see her reinvent herself. And she is definitely my ultimate role model. So I think that impacted me the most growing up, to get back to your question, was watching my mom navigate this military life and just figure out how to kind of have an alternative career path that's very different from what most people are taught to expect.
That's really impressive. And I'm sure the dynamic between your parents was structured in such a way to enable that as well. But
Hmm.
did she ever share any of her secrets in terms of pulling all that off?
Yeah, so
She
I
had a
think
superpower where she didn't have to sleep.
right. Well, yeah, also, well, my mom is a maniac for structure. I mean, the woman, if she sets a schedule for the day, that is happening. So she's very disciplined. But I would also say, so she's from Long Island, so she's not shy about anything. There's not a lot of secrets to her because she's very open and she's
Okay.
very honest. And so I think that is what helped her do that, is when she was ready to go back to work. I think when I was getting into school, she just told my dad, she said, "This is something I need to do. We're going to make it happen." It wasn't, so she was just very direct about what she needed
Yeah.
to grow as an individual. And she was very shameless about it. And then she also really leaned on, I know something that was very different for us growing up, especially on military bases, is that there was just this network of spouses. I mean, she could at any given time drop us all off at the neighbor's house and they'd take us for the day. And then the next day they'd do the same thing back to us. And so there was this network of women that would just help each other. And I think that was pretty integral to her being able to pursue her own things, even while my dad was deployed. So I think that network, and then just her attitude towards life of like, this is what I've set out to do, so I'm going to do it.
Give us 60 seconds on your road through Maze.
Yeah, very humbling beginning. And then I showed up in Texas in August in the heat and was like, what the hell have I done? It was so hot, and showed up in business honors and had never felt so dumb in a room of people, just the most insanely smart people I've ever met. The 2 things I'm most proud of, though, in my junior year, I helped start a freshman leadership organization called PrEP. And that was just a really amazing experience. And I'm still best friends with a lot of the people I started that with. And then my senior year, I studied abroad in New Zealand for a semester, which started a lot of really great friendships. And I later went to live there. So that was a really, really formative experience for me. And I graduated with a finance degree in 2010.
So going back to your graduation, at that time, you must have already seen yourself becoming an entrepreneur and a business owner. Tell us more about that.
I actually didn't. So growing up as a military brat, I wasn't really exposed to entrepreneurship that often. So that was never something that I was like, this is what I want to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. After studying finance, I knew I didn't want to do corporate finance, and I knew I wanted to keep traveling. Those were like the 2 things I knew when I graduated. And so I was actually all set up to go study or to go teach English abroad. And that's what I was planning to do after I graduated, before I started working for this startup. And I'm trying to get back to the original question you asked, but yeah, no, I hadn't always planned to be an entrepreneur. That came later on after working for entrepreneurs and seeing their journey and being like, hey, I think I could do this and I think I would really enjoy it.
Yeah, you've used the phrase you grew up in tech startups, dealing with really strong personalities and having to learn and manage, grow a team on the fly. Managing up is another term that you've used previously. Can you tell our audience a little bit about how you refined your skills in managing upward?
The best thing about working for a tech startup and the worst thing are the same. So the best is that, I was their first marketing employee, which means there was no clear role, there wasn't a clear growth path, and there wasn't a lot of things clear, which can be very intimidating and can make the scope of what you work on very broad, a lot of hours. But that's also amazing because if you like that and you can deal with a little bit of chaos, you get to shape that and you get to build that path and kind of craft it to fit you, which was really, really cool. And then something I learned through that process, though, is I was at my first company for 9 years, which is like unheard of for a millennial, right? I don't have any friends. Yeah. That's probably the most unique thing about my, whole career is that I was at one place. In
tech startups, no less.
Yeah, exactly. Which says a lot about the company, right? They did really well of staying afloat and growing. And but when you stay somewhere that long and you start as an intern, when they first meet you know nothing, right? I was a junior at A&M when I started as an intern with them, and they're just teaching you and mentoring you and telling you what to do. And then at some point, you cross this threshold, after I was there maybe 4 years, where I started to really know the company and the products, and I started to know marketing and events really well, to the point where I was in that more than some of the other people in the company. And so when I hit that point, I realized, hey, I gotta talk to them about this and say, hey, I'm ready to take on more responsibility and to lead you to help make these decisions and not just take the decisions and run with them. And so that's what's really hard about growing up at a company, is you really have to speak up and tell them when you're ready for that. Otherwise, they're always going to see you as kind of that younger intern that they need to keep mentoring. And so that was the managing up part. And luckily, I had great bosses that responded really well to that. And, I went to them the first time it happened. To give you a specific example, was we were using some marketing agencies, and I was kind of coordinating with the agencies in our company. And after working with one of the agencies for like 3 years, I was like, hey, I know what they're doing now. I can do this. Let's bring it in house. Like, let's get rid of the agency, pay me a little bit more, maybe let me hire an intern, and we can handle this. And if I hadn't spoken up and said that, then they would have never known that I hit that point. So I think that that's something that I learned that was really powerful for me.
I think one of the biggest inefficiencies still remaining in the business world is that we still don't empower really, really capable people fast enough. And it sounds like your company did that. So good job by them and good job by you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say the tech industry has the opposite problem, in that they actually do that pretty well. They'll hire young, motivated people, and then they forget to give them the structure and mentorship that other industries have in place. So yeah, I would say startups actually tend to go the other route, which has been my experience. But what you're saying, I hear a lot from my friends who worked with bigger companies.
Yeah, yeah. And you were eventually able to negotiate a pretty creative working arrangement as well.
Yeah. The tech startup that I worked with, that's actually based in College Station, JV Knowledge, the owner is an Aggie, who I met because my brother and him were in the fellows program together at Mays. So just Aggies all around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I interned with him, and then I was supposed to go teach English abroad because I wanted to keep traveling. And he's a really smart guy. And he was like, well, my teacher training didn't start in Thailand until 6 months after I graduated from A&M. So he said, well, in the meantime, if you want to save up for your trip, you could go work from our Argentina office. And I was like, that doesn't sound terrible. So I did that. And he said, you can go as long as you agree to consider a full-time position before you leave us to go teach. And so I said, yeah, I can consider anything, no problem. And lo and behold, 6 months later, after being in Argentina, they offered me a job. And I said, I really do want to work here and grow here, but they weren't able to offer me the salary that we both felt that I deserved with my degree and my experience. So I said, well, my goal right now is not necessarily to make a bunch of money, it's to travel. So can we come to an agreement? And they agreed that I could live 6 months out of every year abroad and work abroad from anywhere I wanted. And so I did that. I milked it for all it was worth. And I basically had to make sure that I was online and available to them at least 4 out of the US workday hours every day. But the other 4 hours I could work on my own schedule. And the other agreement was that they wouldn't work around my schedule. So I definitely had to get up a couple times and get on conference calls at 3 a.m. and have them joke about why I didn't turn on my video. And
and then you made a significant life change pretty soon after getting married. How did that all unfold?
Yeah. So I worked at that company 9 years, decided to do something new, and then went to work for a venture capital firm in Austin called Capital Factory to work with even more startups. They worked with hundreds of tech startups and got to lead their marketing and events teams, which was really cool. And in that time, I had met and married my husband, and he decided that he wanted to apply to the military. And I was open to it. I was like, hey, I kind of know that life and I'm ready for an adventure. We had lived in Austin 4 years. I was kind of itching to go somewhere new. And yeah, so he got into the Marine Corps. He left and went to training. And then after about a year of being in that new job, I decided to go join him. And that's when I moved up to Virginia last April. Oh, I don't know how I could forget this. It was literally the day Austin went into lockdown. I was moving and I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? It was like driving across the US in the zombie apocalypse. It was so odd.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
So you're driving during the zombie apocalypse, and then what happened when you got there? Like you're moving in the middle of lockdown. The whole world is in the midst of this pandemic. And how did that part of the story end?
Yeah. So my husband was living in the barracks, and when I got there, he was allowed to move out of the barracks and move in with me. So we got a lease on an apartment. So that's where I was going to from Austin. Yeah. I was driving up there to the apartment, and he calls me. I'm like a day out, and he's like, so with all this COVID stuff, they might not let me leave the barracks for the next 2 weeks. So I'm driving cross country. I haven't seen him in months. And he's like, yeah, I might not be able to see you for a couple weeks. And I don't know if they're going to let me move out of the barracks. And I'm like, what is happening? Luckily,
you were like, I will pull this car over.
Yeah. I was like, let me talk to him,
Right.
And I got there luckily, and he was able to sneak out. Well, not actually, can't really do that, but he got out and was able to get into the apartment and move into it with me. And it was weird getting to a place during lockdown. I was hoping to network and meet a bunch of other military spouses, and that was really hard. All the events stopped. It was hard to meet people. I ended up meeting a couple that lived in our apartment complex, which was really great. So made a couple actually really good friends there. But just overall, it was a weird situation to move into, because I'm used to moving a lot, but I'm also used to like diving straight into whatever I can in that new place. And that wasn't possible when I got there.
And your husband also had a pretty amusing encounter with your family when you first met. Yes?
Yes. So I met Liam we started dating in February 2016, and my dad was retiring from the Air Force in June 2016. So after 40 years, you can imagine this is a big deal. It's like a 3-day event, like a wedding. And I don't know what's crazier, the fact that I invited him after we had only been dating for like 3 months, or the fact that he accepted, because he hadn't met any of my family, and basically all of my family and anyone my family had ever met was going to be there. And on top of that, all the top people in the U.S. military, Secretary of Defense. I mean, this was no small deal. Right. So we get up there, and the big thing in a retirement ceremony like this is the change of command, right? So it's exactly what it sounds like. My dad hands over command of the U.S. Air Force to the next chief of staff. And so at the end of this ceremony,
is there like a scepter or something that represents the command? Like, was there some sort of item that he had to pass on, like a foam sword, perhaps?
No, but I should totally recommend that. They should think about that. I'm trying to remember. I know there's a really, really long salute, very meaningful, and the ceremony's so big that there's like an A-10 and an F-16 parked in the back corners as like backdrops, right? So this thing's big. And at the end, they do a receiving line after every change of command where the outgoing commander and his spouse stand and they shake hands of everyone who's there. So my dad and mom are standing in the corner of this massive airplane hangar, and hundreds, 500-600 people are lined up to shake their hands. And this line is snaking around the perimeter of the hangar. So that means that the interior, like everything in the middle, is completely empty, except for all of the security agents of all of the 4-star generals, Secretary of Defense, et cetera. There's tons of guys in suits with earpieces that look very intimidating.
Yeah.
So my husband, I see some friends from high school who had came, and I completely ditch him during this time. Like there's, they're in line and I'm like, oh, I'm going to go say hi, get excited, accidentally ditch him. So now I'm going to tell it from his perspective because this is how he's told it to me. So he's standing there in the middle like, okay, the boyfriend, what do I do? So he decides to meander over to where my parents are and wait for me there. He's like, oh, she'll come find me eventually. And he's a pretty big dude. And before he was in the Marine Corps, people always thought he was in the Marine Corps because he he's a CrossFitter and looks very fit.
My language.
Yeah. So he goes over and he's standing like 15 feet from my parents with his hands in his pockets, kind of serious because he's a little nervous, and very suspiciously just kind of staring at them. And there's no one near him. Until all of a sudden he feels someone come up very close behind him, put a very firm hand on his shoulder, and then kind of grumble in his ear, who are you and what are you doing here? And he said he might have peed his pants a little bit. And then he kind of, blubbers, and he's like, oh, I'm the general's boyfriend, which he said is like the weakest statement ever, or the general's daughter's boyfriend, and
no,
like the weakest statement ever made.
I like the way you said it the first time.
Yeah. And luckily my aunt comes from the flank and sees him and is like, oh, he's with us. And, we got him a new pair of pants. And to this day, my dad will not admit if that was planned or if they really didn't know who he was. And I just think that's pretty much the best introduction to my family that you can get.
That is definitely the best. Let's shift gears a little bit. You've led a lot of website launches. What steps do people usually skip that absolutely should not be skipped?
And so I'll go through 2 of them. And the first one is that people spend a lot of time, or they should spend a lot of time on the front end of crafting the message and the experience of the website based on their prospects, right? Who they are, how they like to be talked to, what their motivations are. And so they spend a lot of time doing this. They develop it, and then they get either a wireframe up or a prototype or a draft of the website. And at that point, what they really need to do is go back to those people and say, hey, here's what we have. What do you think? And most teams skip that. I think 1, because they just don't want to bug their customers. I hear that a lot. And then 2, I think they're afraid that if they got it wrong, they spend a lot of time on something that, isn't going to work. And so they're afraid of what they're going to hear. But instead, they launch it and they get that feedback after it's live instead of checking their assumptions before it goes live. And so I just tell people, I'm like, ask and be really clear when you ask people, hey, I'm not going to incorporate all of your changes. I just want your feedback from your perspective, because that's still just one person's perspective. But you should always go back to them and check your assumptions before going live, because it often takes 3 to 4 months to develop a site. So there's a lot that happens in those 3 to 4 months that might need to be changed. And then the second thing I would say that I wish I had learned a little bit earlier in managing teams, and this could be applied to any type of team and any type of project really, but website launches are tedious. So not only the time you spend on them, but even just the day of, it's depending on the size of the website, it's like 10 to 12 hours minimum of launching, checking that every single link works, checking all the buttons, finding all the typos that you swore weren't there. And so by the end of it, you're like, if I have to look at this website for 5 more minutes, I'm going to vomit. And so you get it live and you just sign off and everyone, sleeps for the weekend. But really your first step, your first step after getting it live should be to send out a huge promotion internally. Usually there's a really extensive promotion plan for launching a new website to the public, but people forget to send out a communication internally and congratulate all the people that worked on it. Yeah. And I like to take notes throughout the project. Like if someone came up with a really good tagline for the homepage, like I'll write down that like that was so-and-so's idea. Because especially in marketing and design, your work is so visible to the public, but your name is never on it. And so it means so much to them to get that individual recognition. And again, I think you can do this for any project and any type of team to really promote people internally and talk about their individual contributions. And that gets missed a lot in website launches just because of the magnitude of them.
What's the best professional advice you've ever received? You shared it on Twitter recently.
Yeah, so this came to me through my husband who got it from his first boss, who is an Aggie, Barrett Fisher. I'm not sure what class he is, but
good bull.
He told my husband that no one cares more about your career than you do. And when my husband told me that, I was a little bit indignant, like, well, you're my husband. Like, of course you care a lot about my career. My mom cares about my career. But I really sat and thought about it and thought, no, really, no one is ever going to care more about your career than you do. And once you accept that and you are okay with that, it's actually really empowering because it's like, well, then that means I'm the one who needs to make the decisions that are best for me because no one else is going to. I worked for founders who valued me. They were amazing, but their priority is their company, right? It has to be. Their priority isn't my career trajectory, right? So I'm the one who has to look out for that. And I think especially young people, we learn that a little too late because we want others to look out for us all the time. And ultimately, it's up to us to make those decisions.
Yeah. And so I think there's another really cool application of what you're saying, which is that every single part of your life, no one cares more about than you do, other than perhaps like your early childhood, because your parents know, like sort of understand the process of caring for you better than you could possibly understand it yourself. But other than that, like no one is certainly in adulthood. No one cares more about your career than you do. No one cares more about your health than you do. No one cares more about any aspect of your life. And so the idea of kind of insisting on seizing the tiller and being the captain of your own ship in your career, in your health, in your leisure time, in your with your relationship with your family, it is in the long term, it is up to you how all of that goes.
Absolutely.
And so accepting agency in that process is really huge. So thank you for sharing that.
It is. Yeah.
I guess the final piece of that is even when you're dealing with experts, like a doctor, for example, that your doctor knows more about medicine than you do, unless you're a doctor yourself, but they can't. They're not in your shoes, and they don't automatically have the right answer just because they're a doctor.
Right. Yeah.
So
that's so true. That never assume that other people are thinking about things the same way you do, and that they're thinking about it as superior. It's just different.
Yeah, I love that. You also shared on your blog a piece of advice that your dad once shared with you, which I really appreciated. Can you tell us a little more about that?
I was trying to remember how this conversation started with my dad, and I believe it was when I was first approved to hire a full-time employee. And I was 25 and I was like, what am I doing? What do I ask these people? How do I hire someone? And I went to my dad and I said, I know you haven't hired marketing people before, but can you just give me overall advice about what you like to ask people and what people have asked you in interviews that really resonated? And my dad's like not a surface person. He always really hits deep if you watch any of his speaking or, he's always got something deep that just hits you and you're like, oh. And that's what he did. He said, well, I like to ask people what they stand for. And I went, oh, I don't even have an answer to that, And he's like, well, you better figure it out. So I did, and I thought about it a lot, and I ended up asking it of people in interviews, and I had people thank me for the same reason. They go, I've never thought about that, but now I want to. It's one of those questions that just gets you to think about it. And so for me, I would say, I stand for family. I come from a really amazing history of people that I'm entrusted to kind of carry on. I stand for empathy because I just have no idea how you get by in this world and impact anyone else without it. I stand for doing things at 150% because I don't really know how to do otherwise. And I don't think it's worth doing otherwise. And then the last one, I stand for seeing the world and letting it change you. I want to see so much more of the world. I haven't seen enough, but I've experienced enough that I know the impact of it. And there's just so much out there that you have to take in and that can influence your decisions and how you think about things. And I'm really passionate about that.
How have things changed for military families as a result of this?
Yeah, and I'm no expert on military spouses. I've only been one for 2 years. So I'm not going to speak to all the things they've been facing since COVID started, because I think there's an insane amount of things, just like any group of people. But the one that I've witnessed the most firsthand has been employment. And so that's something I've been super passionate about. As you can imagine, moving around every 2 years, I talked about my mom. It's really hard to build a career, especially if you come in as a spouse at 22 years old and you don't have the 10 years of experience I had before I was a spouse. Right. And so it's already hard to build up that career, right? And on top of that, when COVID hit and schools closed, most active duty military members can't work from home. It's just not an option. So spouses had to stay home, and a lot of them had to quit their jobs in order to do so, to be home with the kids. And a lot of them got laid off. So I think the last stat I saw was that unemployment among military spouses is at 22%. So 22% of spouses who want to be employed are not. And it's been cool, but also frustrating to see the move to remote work, because as all these companies started, writing articles and podcasts about how they're doing remote work and it works so great, you kind of heard a collective eye roll from military spouses everywhere who went, yeah, we know, we've been trying to convince you to hire us remotely for years. And so it's great that it's finally happening, but I just hope that those companies also take the extra time to tap into those communities. There's some really cool people doing that, like Hiring Our Heroes. I would encourage anyone who's an employer to check that out. They work with companies like Salesforce to literally build these fellowship programs and pipelines of military spouses. There's some smaller businesses run by military spouses like Squared Away, where I'm actually thinking of hiring a virtual assistant through them, and all of their virtual assistants are military spouses around the world. And you can even get VAs that specialize in a certain industry. And they're working to employ spouses on a smaller level. So there's a lot of ways to do that, but I think that's how they've been impacted, and how I hope to see some more changes. Employers not just going remote, but actually trying to find these remote communities like military spouses and tap into them.
I love that. What has been the single best moment for you in terms of Coefficient Marketing's impact?
Yeah. So since I started that last fall, there's not one big moment that stands out. I would instead say there's a client that stands out to me.
Okay.
Like I said, my experience has been in tech, a lot of business to business software. And I have been able to flex a little bit more working for myself and try working with some new industries. And one of those is a breast cancer research nonprofit.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And it just, that phrase, it hits different. It does. It just, when you help them, when we do a review of an audit of their advertising campaigns, and we're able to, refine the messaging and grow their leads 5 times in 2 weeks, that's like, it's not just revenue for them. It's like making this impact to give more time to women with stage 4 breast cancer. And so I think every small win with that company just feels huge, or with that foundation feels huge. And I've gotten to do a lot of strategy work with them and helping them like map out what their audience looks like and what they're looking for, and how to connect their audience to share the clinical trials they're working on and the research to build this advocacy for stage 4 breast cancer. And so that's just been really fulfilling.
How can our listeners follow what you're doing? What kind of clients are you looking for?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I'm enjoying kind of broadening my scope to new industries. But what I have learned is the types of companies that I like to work with are small to medium businesses that have a little bit, a couple marketing resources internally and have some marketing budget. They just don't have a marketing leader. And so I like to come in and work with what they're doing and help them build a more cohesive strategy that's going to produce results. And I also really like getting involved and helping mentor their teams. Because since I came from being an in-house marketer, I'm a really, really big believer in building an in-house marketing team. So I think what the company that I'm building, how it's different is I don't necessarily want to be an agency that works with a company for the next 5 years. I want to work with them until they can establish their own marketing team. And I want to be a part of that process for them because I think it's really important. So those are the type of companies I'm looking to meet. I'm pretty open to industries, but a lot of my experience is in tech. It's really deep in tech. So I also love talking to them. And to follow me, so I'm a marketer. I have a profile on every platform and I've tried out most of them, but I'm probably most active on Twitter and LinkedIn. And that's at Liz Tweets Tech is my Twitter, and then just my name on LinkedIn. And I'm hoping to get my website up here in the next month. The craziest thing about starting this company is that with my experience and my network, I've been really humbled in that all of my clients have come from personal referrals. I haven't had to do any outreach or marketing yet. I know I will have to, but because of that, I have not prioritized getting my website up because I haven't needed to. So that's something that I'm really working on right now. But like I mentioned, the whole 150% thing, it's got to be great. So especially if I'm telling people I can help them build websites, mine has to be pretty good. So I'm hoping to get it up. I'm hoping to get it up by the time this gets published, but it'll be at coefficientmarketing.com, and the blog will be super active, just sharing, marketing and events strategy and how people can refine that. And then also what I learned about managing marketing and events teams, because I think I have a lot to share there.
I love that. And let's move to rapid fire. What is the book you've given most often as a gift?
I still read physical books, and most of my friends and family are ebook readers. So I feel like I don't give books that often, but I recommend them. And the nonfiction book I recommend most often is called Essentialism. And it's a pretty short read, but for someone like me who's like just overactive brain and wants to get all the things done, it's basically an entire book giving you permission to say no to things and teaching you how, it's like a mantra of how to keep the main thing the main thing. And I like to read it once a year. And I have a lot of friends like me who overcommit themselves often and like to tackle a lot of things at once. And so I often recommend that to them as well, just as a way for them to kind of get a little bit more zen about saying no.
Love it. Anyone you would like to send good bull?
Can I do two?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So one, I would say Chris Morley. I forgot to bring her up. My time at A&M was super shaped by, I worked for the business honors programs. And it was actually the first time I planned events. And I was an events manager for Chris Morley, who's the director of business honors. Best Aggie ever. I stayed in touch with her. She was at our wedding, just an amazing human and mentor and friend to me over the years. And then the other one would be my oldest brother, Mark, class of 01. He was actually corps commander at A&M, so just insane resume on that one. But he has been my biggest, by far, professional mentor my entire career. And he taught me, he's in private equity, so, doing big deals every day. And he taught me how to walk into a room and think and talk like I belonged there. He coached me through every annual review I had, every salary negotiation. And I cannot thank him enough for building that confidence in me over the years.
Well, we cannot thank you enough for the time you've taken today to come speak with us, Liz. We sincerely appreciate your time. Thanks for the laughs. Thanks for the insight.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. For our top 3 takeaways, I wanted to hear how Maddie met your family.
Well, actually, the one that I do remember is how our parents met each other, which was at First Watch. And it went, I guess, so my stepmom was out of town, but my dad and her parents met each other at First Watch. And my dad was talking through like some economic concepts as he is wont to do. So it was So the story of my family is that everyone cares, and her family as well. Everyone cares, and we all figure it out. And the first pass is not always the cleanest, but we always get it figured out. So that was the case here over at First Watch. Shout out to them.
That is hilarious. Your dad giving an economic lesson. The first time Ryan met, not my whole family, he didn't meet my parents, but he met my sister and my cousin and one of our really good friends and my brother-in-law. I think that was the group. And they had driven up to College Station. So they had been in the car for an hour and a half together, and they're all insane. And we were going to go see a Harry Potter movie, and they were all, well, not all of them. I don't think my brother-in-law participated, but most of them were dressed up like Harry Potter. So that was a start, like gonna be a crazy situation. And then they like bust into the house. They don't even say hi to Ryan. And they're trying to settle this argument about the tune for the David McDavid song, The Car Dealership, I think is what it is. Like David McDavid, whatever. I probably got it wrong and they're going to yell at me, but they just bust in the house and like, how does the David McDavid song go? Settle this argument. And Ryan was like, oh my gosh, Ryan's family is not loud, but my family is loud.
I'm glad that he survived that experience. Ryan himself is not loud by any stretch. I don't know how he would process that.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a little overwhelming, I think. Yeah. For our second takeaway, I really loved how Liz asked, what do you stand for? And how she was so able to articulate that. And she said, a lot of people haven't really thought about that. And I don't have yet I have some ideas. I don't have as clear of an answer as she does to that. But ever since I listened to her ask that question, I keep thinking about it. What do I stand for? And I love that line in Hamilton where he says, if you stand for nothing, Burr, what will you fall for? And I think that's really important. The concept of what do you stand for?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I think knowing what you stand for and knowing the one thing that you're good at, I don't know if this is true for everyone, but for me, those two have started to kind of point toward the same thing. You know, managing the fund is incredible and I love my job. But in terms of professionally, like our mission for our podcasting business is everyone deserves a voice. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world. Whether that person is a school district superintendent, a business owner, or a homeless person, everybody has something to share. And being good at helping people share that thing and share their voice I want to be really good at that.
Yeah, that's cool. You are good at that.
Oh, thanks.
And getting better. And that's awesome. For our last takeaway, I really appreciated y'all's conversation about no one will care about blank as much as you do. Y'all started with some things, but as you went on with the conversation, it was basically no one's going to care as much about your health as you do. No one's going to care as much about your business as you do. That was some of the best advice that I got during the PhD program was no one's going to care as much about your dissertation as you do. So just be prepared because if you don't understand that, it's going to create a lot of frustration. And I think the one that I think is really important for us to remember is the health one and the mental health aspect, that no one's going to care about that as much as you are. And you better set those boundaries for yourself.
Yes. Absolutely. Your doctors are highly trained professionals who work for you.
Yeah. But they may not always be as invested as you would like for them to be. And so you have to make them work for you.
Yep. Agreed.
Do you want to close us with a quote?
I would love to close us with a quote. I've been thinking a lot about Walter White from Breaking Bad, the shadow on his recent CAT scan, and the black cloud that overtook his heart. The closer we get to the end of the show, the more Walt scrabbles around and lashes out like a rat when it's surrounded, the less I'm buying Vince Gilligan's whole Mr. Chips to Scarface quote as an analogy for Walt's transformation. I think the most horrifying part of Breaking Bad may be that Walt, at his core, didn't really transform at all. It wasn't greed or generosity or cancer or fear that fueled his reign of death and destruction. It was resentment. Every moment Walt spent in front of a classroom, he was thinking about how beneath him it all was. He was a genius. He was meant to be a millionaire, not this castrated cross between stepping stone and doormat. When you got down to it, Walt desperately wanted to teach everyone a lesson, and I don't mean in the style of Mr. Chips. Andy Greenwald.
Very nice. Very good summary.
Thanks for listening.
An MBA from Texas A&M University can take your career to a whole new level. With full-time and weekend options, Texas A&M suits your schedule. So get a better gig. Visit mba.tamu.edu.
Looking to start a podcast? Trying to tackle questions like, how do I record? How do I edit? How can I get music for my show? What equipment do I need? How do I distribute it? Good news. The podcast architects are here to help. Whether that's from start to finish, fixing the audio quality, helping you get the episodes posted, go to podconsulting.co. Everyone has something worth sharing with the world.